The forest ranger found the backpack first. It was sitting upright against a moss-covered boulder, as if someone had carefully placed it there during a rest break. The morning dew still clung to its weathered fabric. Inside, everything was perfectly arranged. Water bottles full, granola bars unopened, a smartphone with 43% battery life. The last photo showed a smiling couple at the trailhead, timestamp reading 8:33 a.m. the previous day. But Michael Chen and Sarah Rodriguez were nowhere to be found. They weren't the first to vanish on the Manitou Springs Trail in Colorado's Pike National Forest, and they wouldn't be the last. Every mountain range has its share of missing hiker stories. People underestimate the wilderness. They get lost, they fall, they succumb to the elements. But the Manitou Springs Trail is different. It's not particularly long at just under 5 miles. It's well marked. Cell phone coverage extends along most of its length. The elevation gain is moderate. Local hiking groups rate it as intermediate difficulty, perfect for a day hike. Yet since 1987, 23 people have stepped onto this trail and simply ceased to exist. The trail itself seems ordinary enough. It begins at a small parking area off Highway 24, winding through stands of ponderosa pine and Douglas fir. The path is wide and clear, carved by thousands of boots over decades of use. For the first 2 miles, it follows Fountain Creek, the water providing a constant, soothing soundtrack. Wildflowers bloom in spring. Aspen leaves turn gold in fall. On weekends, you might pass a dozen other hikers. But something changes around the 3-mile mark. The trees grow denser, the underbrush thickens, the trail narrows until 2 people can barely walk side by side. And then, according to every map, every GPS device, every surveyor's record, the trail simply ends. Not at a scenic overlook, not at a lake or waterfall, not at another trailhead. It terminates in a small clearing surrounded by towering evergreens, unremarkable except for one detail that has puzzled authorities for decades. The ground is perfectly flat, unnaturally flat, as if someone had taken a massive roller and smoothed every bump, every stone, every root. The forest floor in Colorado is never this uniform. Rangers have dug test holes. The flatness extends down 18 inches before hitting normal rocky soil. No explanation has ever been found. Thomas Brightwater was the first recorded disappearance. A geology professor from Colorado College, he had hiked the trail dozens of times, often bringing students to examine the unique mineral deposits in the area. On September 15, 1987, he told his wife he was going for a quick afternoon hike. His car was found in the parking lot 3 days later. Search teams combed every inch of the trail and surrounding forest. Dogs tracked his scent to that strange clearing and then lost it completely, as if he had been lifted straight up into the air. The search expanded. Helicopters circled overhead. Volunteers formed human chains, walking arm's length apart through the woods. They found nothing, not a shoe, not a scrap of clothing, not a single sign that Thomas Brightwater had existed beyond that flat, empty clearing. Local newspapers ran the story for a week before moving on to other news. These things happen in the mountains. People disappear. It's tragic, but not unprecedented. The trail remained open. Hikers continued to come, most unaware of what had occurred. But Thomas Brightwater's wife, Margaret, refused to accept the simple explanation. She hired a private investigator named Carl Denton, a former Denver police detective who specialized in missing persons cases. Denton spent 3 weeks on the trail, interviewing other hikers, examining the clearing with metal detectors and ground-penetrating radar. His report, filed October 30, 1987, contained one peculiar detail that authorities had missed. The trees surrounding the clearing were wrong, not diseased or damaged, but wrong. Their growth rings, when Denton took core samples, showed impossible patterns. Trees on the north side had gained 15 years of growth in what should have been 5. Trees on the south side showed the opposite, barely aging at all. And one pine, directly adjacent to the flat ground, had rings that seemed to run backward, getting younger toward the bark rather than older. "It's as if time moves differently here," Denton wrote in his final report. "I've seen a lot of strange things in my career, but nothing like this. I recommend against anyone entering this area until we understand what we're dealing with." His warnings went unheeded. Then, 14 months later, it happened again. Jennifer and Robert Mason were celebrating their 5th wedding anniversary. Experienced hikers, they had tackled 14ers across Colorado. The Manitou Springs Trail was meant to be an easy day, a gentle walk before dinner at their favorite restaurant in Colorado Springs. They signed the trail register at 10:15 a.m. on November 3, 1988. Another hiker, David Park, passed them around noon. He remembered because Jennifer was wearing a bright yellow jacket that stood out against the fall foliage. They exchanged pleasantries about the weather. The Masons were heading up. Park was coming down. They never made it back to their car. This time, the search began within hours. Robert's sister was supposed to meet them for dinner. When they didn't show, she drove to the trailhead and found their Honda Civic alone in the darkening parking lot. By midnight, search and rescue was mobilized. By dawn, 50 volunteers were spreading through the forest. David Park led them to where he'd seen the couple. From there, searchers found occasional boot prints in muddy sections, all heading upward toward the clearing. But like before, the trail went cold at that peculiar flat spot. The boots prints simply stopped. Not turned around, not wandered off, stopped. Frank Morrison was the lead investigator for the Manitou Springs Search and Rescue Team. A former Army Ranger with 20 years of wilderness experience, he had seen his share of missing hiker cases. But this one bothered him. In his report, filed with the El Paso County Sheriff's Office, he wrote, "The termination point shows no signs of struggle, no disturbance to vegetation, no evidence of wildlife predation. It is as if the subjects ceased to exist at this location." The sheriff's office kept the case open but had no leads to pursue. Theories circulated: mountain lions, though no tracks were found; a serial killer, though no bodies ever surfaced. Some suggested the couple had staged their own disappearance, but their bank accounts remained untouched, their jobs abandoned, their families left wondering. As the years passed, the disappearances continued with an eerie regularity. Not every year, but often enough to form a pattern. 1991, Marcus Webb, age 34, software engineer. 1993, Linda Hoffman, age 28, nurse. 1995, James and Patricia Choi, ages 45 and 43, teachers. Always on clear days. Always experienced hikers, always vanishing at the same spot. By 1996, the Forest Service installed warning signs at the trailhead. Caution, multiple missing persons cases, hike with partners. Notify rangers of plans. They considered closing the trail entirely but faced pushback from local businesses who depended on hiking tourism. A compromise was reached. The trail would remain open, but rangers would increase patrols. The decision sparked controversy. Dr. Helen Marsh, a psychologist who had been studying the families of the missing, testified at a town council meeting in March 1996. "We're sending people into danger," she argued. "Every family I've spoken with describes the same thing. Their loved ones were experienced hikers, they were cautious, they were prepared, and they all felt compelled to hike that specific trail, even when other options were available. It's as if something was calling them." The council dismissed her concerns as grief-driven speculation. But Marsh had documented something disturbing. In the weeks before their disappearances, several of the missing had reported vivid dreams, always the same. A clearing in the forest, perfectly flat, something waiting just beyond the trees. They would wake with an overwhelming urge to find this place. Most didn't connect their dreams to the Manitou Springs Trail until it was too late. Ranger Patricia Vance drew the Manitou Springs assignment in summer of 1997. A rookie fresh from training, She was eager to prove herself. Her supervisor, Carl Hendricks, gave her a thick folder of missing persons reports. "Read these," he said. "Know what we're dealing with up there." Vance spent her evenings poring over the files. The similarities were undeniable. All victims were between 25 and 50 years old. All were physically fit. All had hiking experience. None had any reason to vanish voluntarily. The clearing appeared in every report, described in identical terms: flat, undisturbed, wrong. She began hiking the trail daily, sometimes twice. Morning patrols, evening sweeps. She knew every tree, every rock, every bend. The regular hikers grew accustomed to seeing her, often stopping to chat. She became the unofficial guardian of the Manitou Springs Trail. On August 12, 1997, Vance was making her afternoon rounds when she noticed something odd. The forest sounds had stopped. No birds, no insects, no wind in the trees. The silence was complete, oppressive, like the world holding its breath. She had experienced quiet moments in nature before, but this was different. This was absence. She quickened her pace toward the clearing, hand instinctively moving to her radio. As she rounded the final bend, she saw them. Two hikers standing at the exact center of the flat ground, perfectly still. Their backs were to her. They weren't moving, weren't talking, just standing. "Hello?" Vance called out. "Everything okay?" They didn't respond, didn't turn, didn't acknowledge her presence in any way. She stepped into the clearing, boots crunching on pine needles. The sound seemed muffled, distant, as if hearing it through water. The air felt thick, resistant. Each step required more effort than the last. "Sir, ma'am, I'm Ranger Vance. Do you need assistance?" Still nothing. They stood like statues, arms at their sides, heads tilted slightly upward, as if looking at something in the canopy. But when Vance followed their gaze, she saw only empty sky between the branches. She was 10 feet away when the feeling hit her. Later, she would struggle to describe it to investigators. Not fear exactly, not dread, something more fundamental. Every cell in her body screaming at her to run, to get away, to not take another step forward. Vance was not someone who scared easily. She had faced down aggressive bears, pulled injured climbers off cliff faces, spent nights alone in the backcountry. But standing in that clearing, looking at those motionless figures, she felt a terror so profound it nearly dropped her to her knees. She keyed her radio with trembling fingers. "Base, this is Vance. I need backup at the terminus of Manitou Springs Trail. Possible 2 subjects in distress." Static. Then Hendricks's voice, concerned. "Copy that. Nature of distress." How could she explain? "Unknown. Just send someone, please." She tried to move closer, fighting against every instinct. The hikers remained frozen. She could see more details now. A man and woman, both wearing modern gear. North Face jackets, osprey packs. Everything normal except for their absolute stillness. Then, between one heartbeat and the next, they were gone. Not walking away, not running, gone. The space they had occupied was empty, as if they had never been there at all. Vance stood alone in the clearing, the forest sounds rushing back like a breaking dam. Birds chirped, wind rustled leaves. The world resumed its motion. She stumbled backward, nearly falling, and ran harder than she ever had, crashing through undergrowth, branches tearing at her uniform. She didn't stop until she reached the parking lot where Hendricks was just arriving with 2 other rangers. Her report caused a sensation within the Forest Service. Some suggested she had hallucinated, suffering from dehydration or exhaustion, but Vance's record was spotless. Her mental health evaluations were clear, and her description of the 2 hikers matched Jessica Crenshaw and Martin Hewitt, reported missing by their families 6 hours later. Their car was in the lot. Their names were in the trail register, 11:30 a.m., but Jessica Crenshaw and Martin Hewitt were never seen again. The Forest Service finally closed the trail in September 1997, chain-link fencing was installed across the entrance. Closed for restoration, the signs read, though no restoration was planned. Local hiking groups protested. Business owners complained about lost revenue, but the decision held. For 3 years, the Manitou Springs Trail was off-limits. The disappearances stopped. Families of the missing continued to hope, hiring private investigators, organizing their own searches. But the forest kept its secrets. Then, in 2000, the political winds shifted. A new forest supervisor, under pressure from local government and tourism boards, ordered the trail reopened. The warning signs were updated, made larger, more explicit. Extreme danger, 23, missing persons, hike at your own risk. Liability waivers were required. Rangers were stationed at the trailhead during peak hours. Dr. Elizabeth Crow arrived in Colorado Springs in spring of 2001. A quantum physicist from MIT, she had taken a sabbatical to investigate what she called anomalous geographical phenomena. The Manitou Springs Trail had caught her attention through academic channels. Too many disappearances, too many consistencies, too many questions without answers. She assembled a team, Dr. Marcus Reed, a geologist specializing in magnetic fields, Dr. Sarah Winters, a biologist studying electromagnetic effects on living tissue, Jack Thompson, a former Navy SEAL turned wilderness guide. Together, they would conduct the first scientific investigation of the trail. On May 15, 2001, laden with equipment, they began their ascent. Magnetometers, spectrum analyzers, radiation detectors, cameras recording across multiple wavelengths. If something was happening at that clearing, they would document it. The first 2 miles revealed nothing unusual. Background radiation normal. Magnetic fields consistent with the surrounding geology. Flora and fauna typical for the elevation and season. But as they approached the 3-mile mark, Reed's instruments began showing fluctuations. Magnetic deviation increasing, he reported, tapping his device. We're seeing variations of up to 15 degrees. Crow nodded, making notes. Magnetic anomalies weren't unheard of in mountainous regions. Iron deposits, geological formations could cause such readings. But 15 degrees was significant. They proceeded slowly, documenting everything. The trail narrowed as expected. The trees pressed closer, and then they saw it, the clearing, that impossibly flat expanse of ground. Jesus, Thompson muttered. Even he, skeptical of anything that couldn't be explained by conventional means, felt it, the wrongness of the place. The way it seemed to exist outside the natural order of the forest. Winters was already taking soil samples. Reed set up his equipment in a grid pattern. Crow stood at the edge observing, calculating. The magnetic readings were off the charts now, the compass needle spinning lazily, unable to find north. "Look at this," Reed called out. He was kneeling near the center of the clearing, staring at his magnetometer. "The field lines don't make sense. They're not following any pattern I've ever seen." Crow joined him, studied the display. He was right. Magnetic fields follow predictable patterns, flowing from pole to pole, bending around obstacles. But here, the lines seem to converge on a single point, then scatter in impossible directions. Some appeared to curve back on themselves. Others simply terminated. "Set up the spectrum analyzer," she ordered. "Full range. I want to know if—" The words died in her throat. Thompson was pointing at something. No, pointing at nothing. At a space above the clearing where the air seemed to shimmer, like heat waves rising from hot asphalt. But the day was cool, the sun hidden behind clouds. They all saw it now. A distortion hanging 20 feet above the ground, shapeless but definite, present but not there. Looking at it made their eyes water, made their brains struggle to process what they were seeing. Winters raised her camera, but the autofocus wouldn't lock. The lens hunted back and forth, unable to find a subject. She switched to manual, guessing at the distance, and pressed the shutter. The camera died. Not just the battery. The entire device went dark. as if every circuit had been fried simultaneously. "We need to leave," Thompson said, his voice steady but urgent. "Now." But Crow was transfixed. The distortion was growing, spreading like ink in water. The shimmer became a ripple. The ripple became a tear. And through that tear, for just a moment, she saw. What? Even years later, in interviews and academic papers, she could never adequately describe it. Not another place, not another time. Something more fundamental, a space between spaces. A nowhere that existed in the gap between here and there. And in that nowhere, shapes moved. Figures that might have been human once, or might never have been human at all. The tear widened. The clearing began to vibrate, a low frequency that bypassed the ears and went straight to the bones. Reed's equipment screamed warnings before dying one by one. The ground, that perfectly flat ground, started to ripple like water. "Run!" Thompson grabbed Crow's arm, breaking her trance. They fled, leaving hundreds of thousands of dollars of equipment behind, stumbling, falling, pulling each other forward. The vibration followed them, shaking pine needles from trees, sending small avalanches of stones down the slope. They burst from the trail onto the highway, nearly getting hit by a passing truck. The driver slammed on his brakes, leaned out his window to curse at them, then stopped mid-sentence. Later, he would tell police they looked like they'd seen the devil himself. The team's findings, what little they managed to record, were published in the Journal of Anomalous Phenomena. The paper sparked fierce debate in scientific circles. Critics dismissed their accounts as mass hysteria, equipment malfunction, misinterpretation of natural phenomena. But others were intrigued. The magnetic readings before the instruments failed suggested something unprecedented. A localized distortion in the Earth's magnetic field so severe it should have been detectable from space. Satellite imagery of the area showed nothing unusual. The clearing appeared as a small gap in the tree cover, unremarkable from above. But when NASA researcher Dr. James Liu compared images from different years, he noticed something odd. The clearing was always the same size, exactly the same, down to the pixel. Forest clearings change, trees fall, opening new gaps, saplings grow, filling old ones. But the Manitou Springs clearing had remained identical in every satellite photo since 1984, when such imaging became available. It was as if time didn't touch that particular piece of ground. The Forest Service closed the trail again in 2002. This time they went further. Concrete barriers were installed. The trail was removed from maps. Signs were posted warning of unstable terrain, toxic soil, endangered species habitat. Anything to keep people away. But hikers are persistent and curious. Despite the barriers, despite the warnings, people found ways to access the old trail. Social media made it worse. Colorado's Forbidden Trail became a challenge for urban explorers and paranormal enthusiasts. Most turned back when they felt the wrongness of the place. But not all. Between 2003 and 2010, 7 more people vanished. The exact number is disputed because not all were reported immediately. Solo hikers with no one to miss them for days or weeks. By the time searches began, any trace of their passage had been erased by weather and wildlife. Rebecca Martinez was different. A documentary filmmaker specializing in unexplained phenomena, she came prepared. Her 2011 expedition included 2 cameramen, a sound engineer, and a local guide who claimed to know a back route to the clearing. They carried satellite phones, GPS beacons, emergency supplies for a week. Every moment would be recorded. The footage, what survives of it, is disturbing. Not for what it shows, but for what it doesn't. The first 2 hours are normal. The team hiking, joking, discussing theories about the disappearances. Martinez interviewing the guide about local legends. Professional, well-shot documentation of what seems like a routine production. Then the quality degrades. Static creeps in. Audio drops out. The image flickers. By the time they reach the clearing, the footage is barely watchable. Figures move in and out of frame, but their features are obscured by interference. Voices speak, but the words are garbled, reversed, speaking languages that might not be languages at all. The last clear image shows Martinez standing at the edge of the clearing, facing the camera. She's saying something, gesturing urgently, then static consumes the screen. When it clears, she's gone. The camera is on the ground, still recording. For 17 minutes it captures empty forest. No movement, no sound, nothing. The cameraman and sound engineer were found 3 days later, wandering the highway in a fugue state. They had no memory of the previous 72 hours. Medical examinations revealed unusual neural activity, patterns typically associated with severe electromagnetic exposure. But both recovered fully, though neither would speak publicly about what happened. Martinez and the guide were never found. Dr. Crow, now teaching at Stanford, published a follow-up paper in 2015. Using advanced computer modeling, she proposed a theory. The clearing, she suggested, might be a point where our universe touches another. Not another dimension in the science fiction sense, but a place where the fundamental forces that hold reality together are weakened, where the boundaries that keep here separate from there grow thin. Such places, if they exist, would be inherently unstable. Reality would flicker, physical laws would bend, and occasionally the barrier would fail entirely. Objects, or people, near such a point when it failed would be pulled through, not to another place, but to a space between places, a nowhere that exists in the gaps of somewhere. It was an elegant theory. It explained the magnetic anomalies, the equipment failures, the consistent location of disappearances. But it raised a terrifying question. If people were being pulled into this nowhere space, were they still alive, still aware, still waiting? In 2018, an anonymous post appeared on a paranormal forum. The user claimed to be the son of Thomas Brightwater, the geology professor who vanished in 1987. He said he'd been receiving emails from his father's account. Not recently, the emails were dated 1987, the day after his disappearance, but they had only appeared in his inbox that morning, 31 years late. The emails were brief, coordinates, numbers that meant nothing, random characters, but one contained a message: "Still here, still walking, can't find the way back, tell Mum I'm sorry." The account was dismissed as a hoax. The email headers were analyzed, declared fraudulent, but the coordinates, when checked, led to a spot exactly 1.3 miles northeast of the clearing, a place where, according to geological surveys, the rock formations created a similar magnetic anomaly, a place where, if Crow's theory was correct, another thin spot might exist. The Forest Service has never acknowledged investigating those coordinates, but in 2019, new barriers appeared in that section of forest, new signs warning of unstable ground, new reasons to stay away. The Manitou Springs Trail remains officially closed, the parking area is gated, the trailhead is overgrown, but the stories persist. Locals speak of lights in the forest on moonless nights, of voices calling from the trees, of shadows moving where no one walks. Last year, a group of college students posted video of their illegal hike to the clearing. The footage shows nothing unusual until the end. As they turn to leave, the camera catches a figure standing at the far edge of the frame, tall, still, watching. When they pan back, it's gone. Analysis of the video suggests it wasn't edited. The figure was there, then it wasn't. Michael Chen and Sarah Rodriguez have now been missing for 2 years. Their families still search, still hope. Private investigators have traced their movements to the moment they entered the trail. After that, nothing. As if they stepped off the edge of the world. The Forest Service maintains its official position. The trail is closed due to dangerous conditions. The disappearances, while tragic, are not uncommon in wilderness areas. People get lost. Accidents happen. There is no evidence of anything supernatural or anomalous. But in 2020, something happened that even the Forest Service couldn't easily explain. A maintenance crew, sent to repair barriers damaged by winter storms, reported finding footprints in the snow leading to the old trail. Fresh prints, made within hours. But the barriers were intact, the locks undamaged, and the prints appeared to begin in the middle of the parking area, as if someone had materialized out of thin air. They followed the tracks, against protocol, for about a mile. The prints were consistent. Adult male, size 10 boots, walking with purpose. Then, just as consistently, they ended. Not at the clearing, but exactly 2.7 miles from where they began. The snow around the termination point was undisturbed. No signs of struggle, no indication the person had turned back or left the trail. Simply there, then not there. A search was conducted, quietly, without media attention. Nothing was found. But one ranger, speaking on condition of anonymity, revealed something the official reports omitted. At the spot where the tracks ended, the snow was melted in a perfect circle, about 6 feet in diameter. Not melted as if by heat, but absent, as if it had never fallen there at all. And in the exposed ground beneath, pressed into the mud, was a partial boot print that matched Thomas Brightwater's hiking boots. Boots that had been missing for 33 years. The implications were staggering. Either someone was playing an elaborate hoax, or something far stranger was occurring. The Forest Service chose not to investigate further. The spot was covered with fresh snow within days. The report was filed and forgotten, but the rangers remember. They always remember. But late at night, in the ranger stations around Pike National Forest, a different story is told. Veterans pass it down to rookies, usually after a few beers, always with nervous laughter. Stay away from Manitou Springs. Don't patrol that sector alone. And if you ever find yourself near that clearing, that impossibly flat clearing where the trail leads to nowhere, turn around, run. Don't look back. Because somewhere, in the space between spaces, in the nowhere that exists between here and there, 23 people are still walking, still searching for a trail that leads to home, still discovering that some paths, once taken, can never be retraced. The forest keeps its secrets. The clearing remains empty, and the trail that leads to nowhere waits patiently for the next curious hiker to discover that some mysteries are better left unexplored. What do you think happened to those hikers? Have you ever felt that inexplicable wrongness in a place that should feel normal? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this story, consider subscribing for more investigations into the unexplained corners of our world. Pleasant dreams.